Hey guys, welcome back to another lesson. Today we're going to talk about suspended chords, sus4 and sus2 chords. These are just so amazing and can be used in so many different contexts to give your playing a modern sound that they're really worth delving into, which is what we'll do today. So you can use them in many contexts. For example, in a pop ballad, you can play something like this. Or, for example, in a jazz context, you can do a McCoy Tyner kind of thing and maybe play something like this. These are really all the same thing, and we're gonna go deeply into the theory and show you many examples going from beginner all the way up to advanced. Okay, we have a lot of ground to cover. Let's get started by talking about the theory of it. And we're gonna start by working with simple chords, triads, before progressing to the more advanced ones. So the first thing on the order of business is to define what these sus4 and sus2 chords are. To do this, let's build or pick any major scale, in this case a C major, and we can number the degrees 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, which is just 1 again. We can also keep on going 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 1. Now if we play the first, third, and fifth degrees, we get a C major chord, triad. If we play the first, flattened third, and fifth degrees, we get a C minor chord. Now notice that what really turns the chord into a major or a minor is the third degree, whether it's the third or the flattened third. A C sus4 chord is obtained by playing the first, fourth, and fifth degrees, while a C sus2 is 1, 2, and 5. Now, because I'm not playing the third, neither the third nor the flattened third, this is neither major nor minor. It's suspended. Most naturally, this would resolve into either a major or a minor. For example, C sus4 to C major, C sus2 to C major, or C sus4 to C minor. This is a very classical sound that might be reminiscent of just classical compositions, maybe even dating back to Baroque music. In a more modern context, what we can do is we can insert a sus4 or a sus2 chord before any major or minor chord that we have in our progression. For example, if we have an F major to a G major to a C major, we can do then an F major to a G sus4 to a G major to a C major. So another example, A minor to a G major to a D major. So we can do an A sus4 to an A minor, G sus4 to a G major, and D sus4 to a D major. So Now notice that I played here an inversion of the sus4 chord. This would be the D sus4 in the root position, and we can invert it just like any other chord. So you can take the root, move it up here, and get an inversion. This brings out an interesting observation, really. This is a D sus4, and if I invert it, I still get a D sus4, but this is also, as you can see, a G sus2. So any sus4 chord is also a sus2 of some other chord. I can invert it again and I get an interesting voicing in fourths. And then I invert it again and I get back to the root form of D sus4. Now, to get a more modern sound, you don't have to resolve sus4 and sus2 chords to their major or minor counterparts. You can just take any major or minor chord in your progression and swap it out for either a sus2 or a sus4 chord and see how it sounds. So going back to our progression, F major, G major, C major, we can play F sus2, G sus4, C major. Now I can play inversions, so I can play the F sus2 like this, and then the G sus4 like this, and C major. So by not resolving, I insert a small amount of tension into my playing, which gives it a modern, interesting sound. Definitely something you'd want to keep in mind when playing progressions. Now let's take this a step further by looking at extensions. And we can take higher chords, 7th chord, 9 chords, 13th chords, and sus them as well. For example, let's say we take a G major, and we can do a G sus4 or a G sus2. And let's play a G dominant 7. And we can sus it as well. G7 sus4 or G7 sus2. We can take a G9 and sus it. So G9 sus4 or a G9 sus2. Now, the G9 sus2, really, if you look at this, the 9 is the same as the 2, so we can omit the 9 and realize that we are really playing a G7 sus2. So there is some ambiguity in the naming of these chords, and which is also why you will never see, or most usually not see, something like a G9 sus2. But you will see a G9 or 9 sus4 chords. That's definitely the case. Another such example is if you think about a G11th chord. Usually G11th or 11th chords aren't played because there is dissonance between the 3rd and the 11th degrees, but if you sus it, the dissonance goes away. But also, the 11th now is the 4, so really what you're doing is you're playing a G9 sus4. Again, which is why you will not see something like an 11 sus4 notation. Now it's interesting, by the way, if you look at a G9 sus4 and you omit the 5th, which is kind of the most boring degree, and you double the 4, you get an F over a bass of G, which is another way of thinking about sus4 chords. So if we have something like a G going to a C, we can do a G9 sus4 going to a C. We can also use inversions and doublings, so this would also be a G9 sus4. Same set of notes, so I'm playing a bass of G, and I'm playing an F, and also doubling the G up here. So putting it all together, we can do an F sus2, G9, sus4, C. Pretty neat. Let's take a step forward and look at a more jazzy setting. To do this, let's say that we have a 5-1 progression, let's say in the key of F. So I'm going to do things that are a bit more advanced now, but it's still worth hanging around just to see things in a jazzy context if you're more of a beginner. So a 5-1 would be a C going to an F major, right? A 5-1. My root now is the F major chord, and I would usually play this with higher degrees, so you know, you can do something like a C 13th chord to an F major 9. Now, as before, I can take, I can do the C 13th chord and I can sus it. I'll usually omit the 5th and I'll get a C13 sus4 chord. And this resolves to a C 13th chord and goes then to an F major 9. Interestingly, the 5 sus4 chord, the C13 sus4, functions as a minor 2, because usually I would play this as a 2-5-1. But what I'm not now doing is doing something like this. Sus voicings lend themselves quite nicely to chromatic motion, so you might do something like this. So I'm taking the C13 sus4, moving these 3 notes chromatically down, and then moving these 2 notes inward here, and this shape down here. Interesting to play around with. Let's take it a step further. Okay, let's next look at specifically voicing in fourths. Again, this can be thought as an inversion of either a sus2 chord or a sus4 chord. Now the first thing I like to point out, and I've already done this a little bit, is that there is a lot of ambiguity in the interpretation of this voicing in fourths. So what I'm playing here can either be a G sus2 or a D sus4. But I could also think of this, really, as an A7 sus4, just without the 5th degree. Or I could also think of this as a rootless E minor 11. Right? I have the 7th, the 3rd, and the 11th degrees of the E minor scale. So these voicings in fourths really carry within them a large amount of ambiguity, which is kind of what makes them interesting. Now the first thing I want to show you is that if you're playing a voicing in fourths like this, you can use the minor pentatonic scale of the root note to solo over it. In this case, this would be the A minor pentatonic, right? Here's the root, it's an A, so A minor pentatonic, And you could also use the A blues scale. Now let's take this one step further. Let's look at the A Dorian scale. And we're going to start by building this voicing and fourths on the root. And now we're going to move things up, playing this set of notes, which basically means that we're going to take this shape and move it up within the scale. So here's what we're going to get. Move up one step, another step, another, 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 and then we're back where we started, just an octave higher. Now this generates a set of chords, and specifically a set of fourths, right? We get this voicing and fourths, this isn't, we're gonna get back to this, and this. So we get 5 different voicings and fourths, and the interesting thing is that we can actually move between them in no particular order and still solo using the A minor pentatonic scale. And you can already hear this kind of McCoy Tyner-like modal harmony feeling coming out of this. It's kind of interesting to think about what these different voicings mean. And I've put on the screen some interpretations. Again, I've shown you how you can interpret each voicing and fourths in different ways. So for me, this might be, let's say, an A7 sus4. This would be an A7 sus2, maybe an A minor 9. E7 sus4, and this could be a D6 9, right? Basically I'm playing a D major chord and I'm adding the 6 and the 9. Okay. Now what about these non-chordal chords that we've encountered in between, right? We had this set of 2 chords that aren't really voicings in fourths. What sort of sense can we make of them? Well, we can actually use them when playing on the A minor pentatonic scale. They kind of fit in there, actually. Now we can interpret them. If you look at something like this, it has a tritone in it, and anything with a tritone strongly suggests a dominant 7th chord. In this case, this could be either a D7 of some sort, a D dominant chord, or this could be an A flat dominant 7th chord of some sort. My own personal interpretation for this is really a D 13th chord, right? So if I played the 3rd, 7th, and 13th, and I move this up an octave, I get this kind of voicing. This is, again, you see this indicates again that we probably have something that is D dominant. This is kind of, I guess you can think of this as an add 4, maybe. Like a D7 add 4, which is the way I see it. So really what we're doing is we're playing an A minor or an A dominant 7, a D dominant 7, and an E dominant 7. And that kind of makes sense if we use the A minor pentatonic or A blues scale, right? So all of these voicings and fourths that we play are really kind of revoicings of the basic blues progression in A. Now you can take this even one step further, like I've done in the little piece I played at the beginning, and add additional sort of tritone voicings in between. And you can do this anytime you have a voicing in fourths. If you drop the lowest note, you get a tritone, or you could also drop the two lowest notes and get a tritone up here. So for example, I can play this. For the next chord, I can maybe drop the lowest note. And what would this be? Well, this would be a C 13th chord. Then I can go higher up. Right, this would be a D 13th chord, an A7 sharp 9, which is obtained by taking this voicing in fourth and dropping this lower note. An F13th chord, which is obtained by dropping the lowest note of the E here. If I take this D6-9 and I drop the two lowest note, I get this C7 add 4, D7 add 4, and E7 sharp 9, which is obtained by dropping the lowest note of this voicing in fourths. And again, we're really within kind of like a blues progression, right? We can take these chords, the A7, D7, E7, and we also add a C dominant 7, or just a C7 and F7. And all of these play well. With the A minor pentatonic or A blues scale. So we're just really using kind of these funky voicings. And we're really just kind of playing a blues tune. That's the way at least I think about this. But the voicings are really quite interesting and have this modern sound to them, and you should probably, if you like this, try to memorize them and transpose them to the different 12 keys. So that's it for today's lesson. We really covered a lot of ground, and I hope I've taken you through really kind of an odyssey of sus chords and voicings and how they can fit within modern frameworks of either pop or jazz. I hope you learned something interesting, and I will see you next time.